Moving forward, we're talking about Disney. Some concerning news over the week. I think it was Monday. This story broke via Screen Rant. Good writer Mike Jones published this article.
Matt
Joe, I'll
Jones
let you
or
take
Matt Singer.
Matt Singer. Excuse me. I read another one today by Mike Jones. Matt Singer is also a very good writer, but I read another article from Mike Jones too, as well. Not the rap producer, not the great rap producer Mike Jones. Joe, I'll let you take it though. Matt Singer, Mike Jones is Mike Wilmade, and whoever article from Screen Rant you want to read. The floor is yours to introduce this one.
I'll be using the Screen Crush one by Matt Singer, but basically last week we talked about how it was sad to see that Regal Theaters was closing its doors and everything. And if that wasn't a little like punch in the gut, well, this one's definitely another one. Disney will now be primarily focusing on streaming services with their content. So what this is basically meaning is that when Disney wants to make something, rather than thinking about, okay, how about the theater experience, they're more focused on the streaming experience. They will be using, of course, Disney Plus, their own streaming service, as well as Hulu and ESPN is another thing that this article points out, which could mean like sports documentaries, maybe even sports films, who knows. It doesn't say anything about the other streaming services as like HBO Max, Netflix, stuff like that, because I mean, why would Disney give it to them if they have like 3 of their own? But yeah, basically now when it comes time to making their next Marvel film, making their next Star Wars film, or their next big animated hit, they're going to prioritize how can this work on a streaming platform. Guys, what do you think about this? Steve, we'll start with you.
I'll jump. Maybe it was inevitable with the launch of Disney Plus almost a year ago that they would go this direction. Maybe it's a sign of like a blurry future as the world kind of deals with a global pandemic and we're all trying to navigate this present hellscape. But I think the news comes after Mulan, which I know there's been like kind of conflicting figures on that, but it's reportedly pulled in millions on Disney Plus. And then you have Pixar's Soul, which is set to drop on the service on Christmas Day. And Disney Plus's originals, both movies and TV series, they've largely failed to leave any kind of cultural impact. They really have. I don't really see too many people talking about High School Musical, the musical, the series, online or the world according to Jeff Goldblum.
Or even the dog movie. God, I forgot the name.
Show Dogs?
No, where they eat the spaghetti and then they kiss.
Lady in the Tramp.
Yeah, that was like their
Tramp,
first
the
original hit
remake
on there.
That was a stealth release.
Yeah, that was a stealth release for sure. I brought up Mike Jones earlier because I wanted to mention this. He made an interesting comparison to Disneyland with this move. And I thought he was really succinct in how he said it. Disneyland opened back in 1955, and it had a slow start for several years, almost a decade. And no one could have really seen like the unbelievable rise in the global popularity of not only Disney as a brand, but Disney as kind of a theme park mecca so early. But they went where the puck wasn't in that sense. They went where the puck wasn't in that sort of sphere to sort of market their brand and their characters. And it could be they have a similar inkling about streaming, but either way, I don't think no one can blame them for like capitalizing on their sole reliable revenue source right now. Seeing as theaters are struggling, Disney Plus is really the only thing that's, I don't want to say keeping them going, but the only reliable, consistent platform where they have direct user connection and company to user communication on that front. This is their only reliable revenue source in what is already a rough year. But ultimately, what's on the tip of my tongue with this whole story, before I send it over to you, Dom, what's on the tip of my tongue with this whole story is, my God, how many nails does the theater coffin need to take this year before we even get a chance at a vaccine for this godforsaken virus? Like, that's my thing, is that this year has been exponentially brutal for movie theaters. And I think Disney Plus or Disney might have always had this in the back of their mind that they were going to prioritize streaming. But this accelerated. This whole pandemic accelerated this move. And it's another point of worry and fear for movie theaters.
Yeah, it's just funny how now that Tenet has been released, and I'm sure there'll be postmortems as the year closes. But now that Tenet's been released, the next big like health checkup we do here on the show is pretty much Disney, for the most part. But I give it like a list of four-ish things here, four big things. First and foremost, yeah, as Steve mentioned, as both of you mentioned, it's forced evolution, kind of a redundant term, but still, it's just. It just amazes me how not surprising, but still amazes me how Disney Plus went from the least important thing, just from how they were treating it, to the now most important thing. And now this is a huge pivot, and this is one definitely for the history books, one for the business history books as well. The second one is the new gentleman they have in charge of media and entertainment distribution. So I'm getting this from the big press release that they put out. Very, very dry stuff, but I guess that's our job to parse through. Is Kareem Daniel, chairman now of media and entertainment distribution in Disney. Very interesting character. Not maybe, I don't know. It's still some dry stuff because he worked at Goldman Sachs for 3 years, and then he was
one of those.
Yeah, exactly. But according to a lot of the articles on him, a lot of the Business Insider stuff, and he was picked by Mr. Oh my goodness, who's this? Who's the new CEO? I keep going defaulting to
Bob Chapek.
Yeah, exactly. David, I think David Chapek, right?
I thought it was Bob Chapek. Could be wrong.
Yeah, but either way, Mr. Chapek, we'll call him Mr. Chapek. He had worked with him before, hired him as an intern, but I guess this was after he worked at Goldman Sachs as manager. So I don't know what that story is about. But he's been in the game for a long time at Disney, since August of 2007. Loved comic books as a kid. So young guy. So it'll be very interesting to see where it goes. And he's been in this thing for a while now. So just be interesting. 3 is just kind of where Bob Iger is, which is kind of a side story to all of this. But he is no longer CEO. But he oh my goodness, where was the? He is here you go. Bob Iger, in his role as executive chairman, I wonder if that role was there or if they made that for him, will continue to direct the company's...
he came back. He came back in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
He came back.
Yeah.
Stepped down to kind of galvanize the ship.
Will continue to direct the company's creative endeavors. So that's just an interesting dynamic here, how they have it. They can restructure whatever the heck they want their company. But it's just interesting to see where that will continue to go. And then last, this is more of a fun, not so fun fact, is at the end of the official Disney statement is they have a bottom part called forward-looking statements. Actual results may differ materially from those expressed or implied, blah, 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 as well as from developments beyond the company's control, including changes in domestic and global economic conditions, competitive conditions and consumer preferences, adverse weather conditions or natural disasters, health concerns, international, regulatory, political, or military developments. And I'm thinking there, of course, they have to put that in at the end there, kind of like how you always have to do about, peanuts may have come into this food at some point during the assembly line. But looking at it now, it's like, yeah, all those things are very possible in our current climate. So it's just going to be, it's just funny to think that there's someone at Disney, the Disney, where you're supposed to lose all mention of the real world and get lost in this magic kingdom. Someone there is thinking about military developments and how that's going to affect the international distribution of the world, according to Jeff Goldblum. So, it's just a sign of the times. It'll be interesting to see what Disney does from here with their streaming focus.
Yeah, I have no idea where this is going to go, but I thought that Mike Jones bringing that up with the Screen Rant article, which I also kind of worked off of for this segment, I thought it was intriguing how he harkened back to Disneyland and talked about how it really wasn't, Disneyland was not seen as a success until about the mid to late 60s. It took a while, because you got to also think, too, when it was incepted in 1955, or created rather in 1955, they didn't have this litany of properties and famous characters and stuff. They had a few recognizable iconic characters.
That was it.
And stuff.
Mickey Mouse and Snow White.
Absolutely. But you got to understand, too, it was a whole different time. If you wanted to see movies in the 50s, you had to go to a movie theater. There was no such thing as home video. Home video wouldn't come to fruition until the 70s. So that you really had no way to see a lot of these classic, what now considered classic movies. So it took a while for Disneyland to catch on just as a haven, because, it was about getting the IP. The IP had to be in place in order to make the park, and then you had to have sort of brand recognition. So I think it's interesting, too, that Disney's making this pivot now, and it's kind of turning heads. And I wonder if, like, who knows, 20 years from now, we're going to be thinking that was a wise-ass move. Theaters were antiquated. Yeah. I hope that's not the case. But it also is just expedited by the fact that movie theaters now are a risky bet, and that a lot of the public does not want to put up with. Dom, final word.
For sure. Jeffrey Katzenberg has Quibi, so they've got some stiff competition. No, but in terms of that, actually reminded me, just mentioning how everything's changing here. That reminded me to a clip of Michael Eisner in the 80s. He was being interviewed, I think, by a journalist from 60 Minutes. I'm doing this from memory. It was a clip featured in either a Waking Sleeping Beauty, which is a documentary on the Disney Renaissance in the 90s, and I think it was also featured on the Imagineer Story, which is the Disney released self-documentary on their own company. So they'll paint it nicely. But still, Michael Eisner, the woman journalist asked, why are you still, set on making movies, even though now the money, because this was a drought. They're in the middle of a drought in terms of money coming from the movie industry. It was all parks and TV. And Michael Eisner turned to her and said, I forget exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of, it's our tradition. It's where we came from. Considering how, that's how Walt Disney broke through, is that he made Plane Crazy and he committed to Mickey Mouse and that animation studio. So just if moving away from theaters hits hard if you're a Disney fan, but at the same time, just considering how absolutely insane the world is right now, this makes total sense. So this is part of our long running history archive of just the slow death of theaters. Maybe, I hope not. Same with you, Steve. But it's just so crazy to see a titan with all the criticisms that they rightfully earn. It's interesting to see how Disney is adjusting to this.
That's the thing too, is that like with them being a titan and like on the stream right now, you guys can't see it, but the viewers can. I have like the top grossing movies of 2016. And the top 10 ones, domestically box office, like, more than half are Disney films, Disney-owned distributed films.
Oh, yeah, dude.
And then, like, even right below it, it's, like, number 12, Moana. Number 13, Episode 7 for Star Wars, which came out in 2015, but because, like, it just went into 2016, it made enough money to be number 13 of the top grossing movies of 2016.
Yeah, it only had, like, a week. It only had, like, a couple weeks of 2015, if that, to make the money. So it made its bulk of its earnings after January 1st.
So
the 2010s is pretty much just Disney in terms of movies making their money and getting the hell out in time for the pandemic.
It's really scary because it makes you think, okay, if the titan of Disney is doing this, is Warner Brothers going to follow? Is Universal going to follow? And then where does that leave theaters? Especially that Fox is owned by them too now, because then like you think, well, what about 20th Century? Oh yeah, that's right.
That's Star. I think that's going to be the other, according to, I think that press release is like Star streaming services, which has not been released. It was announced for 2021, but I'm pretty sure before the pandemic. So that's just like, I'm probably going to accelerate that, but we'll see how that goes. Cause that's, I believe, for I forget the term. Like Star services would be for non-franchised property. So either way, we'll cross the road when we get to it, because we're going to be a streaming focused show now. For sure.
The following, the last point I'll make, and then we'll follow through with a review of Hubie Halloween. The last point I want to make too is that I think it's worth noting that Disney owns so damn much that when they say they want to prioritize streaming content, however, they're not just exclusively talking about Disney Plus. They got Hulu, they got ESPN Plus. You know what I mean? They have other services, big money services in their pocket too. Yeah. So what this could mean, I think Joe even mentioned it earlier in the show, what this could mean for like sports, cinema and stuff like that, or even for like ESPN sports programming rather, and even Hulu content as well. There's really, this is broad enough. It's concrete enough that it would send shockwaves throughout the industry that they're going to prioritize streaming. Yeah. But it's vague enough and broad enough that you don't know exactly what their mindset is going to be behind this. And that's what I think makes this the talking point that it is, and the fact that we just spent about 15 minutes trying to cover the basis and decipher the jargon behind it.
Hell, all those Phantom Event movies that like were about like any sports team documentary thing, it's probably just going to go to ESPN, and they'll probably just buy it up.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know the Lakers just won the final this year. They put that that Michael Jordan doc back in IMAX again, and you wonder if stuff like that's just going to wind up becoming, I don't know. You wonder if that stuff is just going to wind up becoming an exclusive to ESPN Plus, like a 30 for 30 or something.